Hey everyone, I'm thrilled to be here today, really excited. I'm here with Lance A. Slatton. For over the past 10 years, he's been a certified senior case manager at Enriched Life Home Care Services, where he assists families and individuals in aging in place with dignity and accessing the resources and services they need for long-term care. He has a passion for dementia care and education, and he has facilitated, hosted, and provided multiple training and educational series to communities and organizations on the process, changes, and needs of this disease. Since May of 2020, Lance has also been the podcast host and chairperson for the board of directors at All Home Care Matters, the nation's leading voice in long-term care issues. All Home Care Matters is a podcast and YouTube show that discusses all things home care, featuring guests, resources, tips, and topics that are important for families navigating long-term care issues. Through the platform, Lance aims to raise awareness, inform, and empower people who are facing or planning for long-term care challenges. As part of All Home Care Matters, Lance is an awesome host and amplifies the voice of countless individuals and initiatives. So I'm thrilled that Lance is a guest on Caregiving Insights, and the camera has been turned around so we, the audience, can learn about his journey and amplify his voice. Welcome, Lance.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation, Todd. I'm excited to be here.
My pleasure. So let's just jump right in. What prompted you to create All Home Care Matters?
Well, it's kind of twofold, Todd. We, as you mentioned, our company, Enriched Life Home Care Services, we have been providing resources, caregiver support groups throughout southeastern Michigan, and educational events, everything we can to just support and provide those resources to our communities, their loved ones, and their families. And as we all saw a few years ago, COVID started creeping its head in, and all of a sudden, these attendance was down. These facilities were starting to limit their extracurricular activities. And though our company was still operating as deemed essential by our governor, what I really took a lot of joy and passion out was just meeting people in the community and feeling like I'm making even the smallest difference and just helping to support them. Eventually, the dwindling down turned into closed doors. And so one night I was actually out at the track by my house, and I was listening to a podcast, and wasn't too familiar really with the understanding of what a podcast actually was. And so I went home and I told my wife, I said, I think I know what we could do. We should start a podcast. And of course, her response to me was, what do you even know about them? And I said, nothing. So that set forth a lot of research and, kind of diving into what podcasts are. Is there room? Is there a need in this area for another voice? And we quickly discovered there's a lot of wonderful podcasts out there, just like Caregiving Insights or, others that are doing this. But a lot of them specialize in a specific issue, dementia, Parkinson's, all these different things. And we wanted to do one that kind of encompassed all of the issues that families may face on their long-term care journey. And so several months later, we launched All Home Care Matters.
That's awesome. So what has been some of the feedback from the show?
It's been great. I admittedly, I am not one that likes to be in front of a camera or listen to myself talk. And again, we thought this was just going to be something for 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks. And it turned into present day, almost 3.5 years later. And, it's made a difference, and that for me is the biggest thing. This was something we did out of a true motive of helping others. And at the end of the day, I always feel like if we've helped one person, we've done our job. And, the feedback and the responses we've received has just been phenomenal, more than anything I could have expected.
Yeah, it's incredible. I've spoken to a lot of people over the past, since I became familiar with you and the show. I've spoken to many people over the past 9 months, and it's incredible the feedback that I'm getting about the show. And so why do you feel the show has resonated so well with people?
Well, usually somebody will say, what's your secret recipe for the success? And I said, there, first and foremost, there is no secret recipe. What I do feel like has contributed to it is twofold, though. One is, we did launch this at the very, very beginning of COVID, before a lot of the states were even shut down. And then slowly everybody was shut down. And I think it gave people time to explore and find alternatives. So they may have stumbled upon us. But I also think doing things for the right reasons. You have a personal story. I have a personal story. Our story isn't the bottom line first. It's helping first. And I think that really comes across in anybody who is doing something as a passion and they're doing it for the right reasons. I think the success just follows.
I agree with you completely. And that's some great advice. Do you have any other advice for others who are looking to start a podcast or a YouTube show?
Yeah, well, first, my advice is always go do it. A quick story. We had recently won the Silver Creator Award from YouTube and Google for surpassing 100,000 subscribers. I had no idea that that was such a big issue until our editor was starting to get really excited and making all these grandiose plans for when we cross 100,000. I said, well, what are you so worked up about? Because there's billions of people, right, in the world. And I'm thinking 100,000 is just a fraction of a percentage of that number. He said, no, on YouTube, when you surpass that number, YouTube will audit your channel. They will authenticate or verify your channel. I mean, there's all these, triggers that go off once you surpass that number and you get the custom plaque. I would never have imagined that a show about long-term care would be successful. My kids watch YouTube, but they're watching, Veggie Tales or, Odd Squad or things like that. And I understand that those are like actual shows, but a show where we're talking about caregiving and dementia and things, it's usually such a specific area. You wouldn't think that it would be such a big issue or resonate with so many people, but we've gotten, messages from teachers who have, we had certain guests on who are well known in the area of dementia, and they'll take clips from that interview and use that for an example in a classroom. It's just things that it never ceases to amaze me how we've reached people or the impact it's had.
So it's a confluence of timing, your efforts, everything that kind of brought this together that helped it reach where it is today.
I think so. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so of course, with every endeavor, there are some obstacles. So are there any that you've encountered along the way?
Well, as long as you promise not to use any of these clips, I will share. But I always tell people, please don't go back and look at our first few episodes. Not that they're bad or anything, but one, probably a little too much excitement, a little too much enthusiasm. But we kind of, you learn those growing pains as you go. Just like almost like when you're a first time parent, you're going to be a great parent. You're full of enthusiasm. You have all the best intentions, but there may be things that you would do differently now that you didn't know back then. It's not no fault of your own, but some things I think just comes with experience.
Absolutely. On the other side of things, what have been some of the triumphs that you're most proud of?
One of the things I am most proud of is reaching the 100,000 subscribers. Now knowing it's such a big deal, the last time I checked, there's different numbers. There's either 53 million or 68 million, depending on the source you look at, YouTube channels. That means just making a channel, doesn't even have to have content on it. Out of that 53 to 68 million, only half of 1% will ever reach 100,000 subscribers. So I feel like, that's now knowing what I know, I feel very proud of that. But at the same time, this might sound strange to you, Todd. It's also a little sad because that means it seems like there's so many people that aren't getting the information they need from their local healthcare providers. So they're going to a place like YouTube or, Google and searching it out and having to find it out for themselves. And just with our business that we run day to day, all the families we encounter who, and I'm going to use the phrase that my friend had used recently, but he didn't coin it, but he had heard it, and I said I'll steal it. It's diagnose and adios. They're going to that doctor, they're getting a diagnosis, and I'm going to use dementia because that's primarily the one we run into the most, and that's all they get. they get that diagnosis, they're not given the tools, the resources, or the support for what happens next once I get home and my father is refusing to sleep at night and he's wandering, or whatever the situation may be. And we're just trying to be an extra resource for whoever needs it, to either learn from the experts, reliable, trusted information, or just let them know you're not alone. You may feel alone because maybe your social circle isn't dealing with all of the issues that you're facing, and it's hard for them to truly understand what you're facing if they haven't gone through it. But you're not alone in the big picture, because there's countless people out there who are going through the same thing that you are.
Absolutely. My Care Friends was developed very much for the same reasons. Having been through it with my parents for the past 5 years, and certainly those first 3 years, where it was 17 hospitalizations in 22 months for my mom. It was just every
Right.
time you turn around back, and then it's, where do I go? Who do I talk to other than the healthcare provider? So
Right.
this is a way for people to learn. So very similar
Absolutely.
reasoning. What is something that has surprised you along the way that you may not have expected?
Naively, the people out there who aren't providing good information or authentic resources or have an authentic motive, that's very sad for me, and frustrating, because you know with you with your parents, me with my grandmother who had dementia, my father, his wasn't dementia, he had developed a horrible infection. It's the people preying on the naiveness, the ignorance, and the crisis of other people. And what I mean by that is, we have had people reach out to us who have a company, but the company is selling things like the cure to Alzheimer's. It's this organic, over the counter, guaranteed to cure your Alzheimer's. And we're talking very expensive products too. The low plan was $7,900. And that's just phase one of 3 or 4 phases. And they're wanting to throw money at us, if you will, to be on the show for us to promote this product. And, if we were opportunistic, we would say, okay, sure, yeah, we'll take your money, and yeah, whatever you got, we'll put it on there. But that's not who we are. That's not who you are. But there are people out there who aren't like you and I, who will help just take the paycheck and help promote these things that are going to leave these people either financially devastated, emotionally devastated, or both. And for them, it's just a business. And that's the frustrating and very disappointing part of this, is you encounter other people, not a lot, but they're out there, who you just really wish didn't exist, because they're not helping the cause of supporting these families.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Certainly, as you mentioned, I've come across them as well. And
Yeah,
it's disheartening when that happens and when you see it. And that's why that in part motivates me even more to
exactly.
to get the true word out there, to get resources for people and help. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so any favorite guests you've had?
Ooh, I would say all of them, to be politically correct. Um, I will say though, someone who has become a very near and dear friend is Lori LeBay. I don't know if you know this, or if your viewers or listeners know. Lori and I had actually partnered up about 4 or 5, 6 months ago. She has Alzheimer's Speaks. She's the co-founder of Dementia Map. She's doing tremendous, tremendous work. And she's somebody that I personally look up to and admire, because she's been doing this before it was quote unquote cool. She's been doing it since the mid 90s, at the very infancy of the internet and message boards and things. But she's such a proponent and such a positive influence and advocate for families and those living with dementia. It's hard not to just be in awe and just complete admiration for what she's done and what she's accomplished.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I do know of Lori, and so it's great to hear a little bit more about that backstory, which I did not know. So, any plans or things in development that you'd like to share with everybody?
Well, I'm always planning. My brain's on constantly on the on button, on switch, and coming up with ideas to how we can reach and help more people. It's not today or tomorrow, but we are in the works of starting a internet streaming TV channel. Uh, I'm not going to put a date on it because it is in the works, but that is the next step in just our evolution of All Home Care Matters. And we want it to be something accessible and available and readily available to everyone and anyone who wants it. So there's not going to be a fee or a charge to use it. But I just feel like, the more people we can reach, the better off we're all going to be as a society. And I'm not just saying all home care matters, you with caregiving insights, Lori with her show, we're all kind of unified with one voice, just to try to help and support these families that really need that help and support. Because, if you don't have a background in it and you don't know anything about it, like, I'm preparing in route to medical school. I thought I invented the wheel with my father's situation. Told my wife, I said, let's start a company where we can send people in to help, like what we're going through, not realizing there's a whole industry out there. But again, medical school, healthcare training, things like that, they're teaching more of the biologies and the clinical aspect, not so much the resource aspect. And so, I was a little sad I didn't reinvent the wheel, or invent the wheel, I should say. But, you know, just any way we can help other people, I think is something we should all do, whether it's through caregiving or whatever it is, we should make the world a better place.
Amen. I agree with you completely. So we're coming down to the end. I have two questions left. One is there a topic that was harder than others for you to cover and discuss?
Well, yeah, for me, it's always when it's about a child. I'm a father of three young children, and something I'm proud of, but it was also difficult, was we actually had a mother reach out to us through a mutual connection, and her son was born with Williams syndrome, and she had never shared the story publicly outside of her family ever. And she felt comfortable enough with us that she wanted to do that for the very first time on our show. And that's something that meant a lot to me, but it was also difficult. And it raised some questions as a parent myself. It was the approach she had taken with her son. Was he went through all of his, elementary school, middle school, high school, primary education, not knowing he had Williams syndrome. And they lived in a very small town, and everyone in the town basically knew about this except this boy. So here's where my conflict as a parent came in. Would I tell my child? But then as a son to parents, I thought, if I was the child, would I want to know? And I still have never really satisfied either of those questions. I don't know if I'd want to know, but I also don't know if I would keep it from my child. And it was very tough. And I think it says a lot, though, when you're raising a child with special needs or disabilities, because it's they're having children, as I've said. You see the stuff that may not be possible or may be more difficult, or the things they may have to experience. And it does make you very grateful for what you have, and appreciate what you have, but also not to take anything for granted.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's quite a dilemma.
Yeah,
Not having children myself, I can only imagine that
yeah,
dilemma, what you share, what you don't share, when to share,
right,
and so forth.
absolutely.
Wow. So one final question. Um, you're very busy. What do you do for fun? When do you find time to do that?
Well, so I don't have a great philosophical answer for this, other than I really don't feel like I'm working because I'm doing what I love, if that makes sense. I tell people, if I had a job, we're in the Motor City here in Michigan. If I was working at one of the auto plants, I don't know that I could do what I do, because I wouldn't love it. But there's people that love that and would look at me and say, there's no way I could do that. I just take great joy in, doing what I'm doing, and every day is kind of a new adventure, if you will. And so far it hasn't made me too tired.
Well, that resonates for me too. And thank you so much for being here today. I
My pleasure.
appreciate it.
And you're going to be our guest here pretty soon too.
And I will. And I'll look forward to that as well.
Yes,
I'll be on the other side of it.
you'll be
Perfect.
on the other side. Thank you
Thanks so
so
much.
much, Todd. I appreciate it.
You too, Lance. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. primary purpose of the podcast is to educate. While guests are invited to listen, listeners acknowledge that they are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or any guests. One Day, One Week and its sponsor, 17 Commerce LLC, expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use the podcast episodes or the information presented in the episodes.